Hello, this is Shannon Riley of Backyard Pet Talk, my podcast. And today I have Dianne Canafax from KARE in Washington. And she's going to tell us all about her shelter or her rescue and everything she does. She does so many things I say that I am not even going to try to get all of the things. I'll let Dianne tell you because I probably will miss things. So welcome, Dianne. I'm so happy to have you today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to meet you, everybody.
So, just as a little background, I got to go to her facility and do chicken camp, and it was a great experience. We did it with Terry Ryan, so it was amazing. But then I got to learn about KARE, and I just wanted to share that with all of our listeners and the people who follow our podcast. So, Dianne, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first? Let's hear about Dianne before we jump into KARE.
I was a professional trainer in the corporate world for many, many years. Began being a volunteer puppy raiser for Service Dog Agency, which is where I fell in love with the concept of training dogs with people, etc. So after I retired, and I was fortunate enough to retire at a fairly early age, I started my own dog training business. Got certified, this is back in the late 90s, through CPDT, Certification Council of Professional Dog Trainers, because I wanted the legitimacy. And I was volunteering at a shelter for many years to help train people, volunteers, staff about dog behavior, dog body language, how to make the dogs more adoptable. And at some point during that, the shelter I was volunteering at, we did not have, part of why I was volunteering is we didn't have any kind of behavior program. Remember, this is, 20 plus years ago.
Exactly.
Um, which seems archaic now, but was the norm. And they asked me to come on board and start up a behavior department. And I did that with the understanding I would do that, get the program up and running, because that's what I did a lot of in my corporate background. And then I'd go back into retirement and be a professional volunteer. So I did that for many years. So that's kind of a brief,
How
who
you
who I
kind of got
am.
started. And yeah, you're one of those
Yeah,
like me. I wanted to get that first certification from CPDT just for some kind of legitimacy since the
yep,
dog training
yep.
doesn't have any licensing. And it feels like, I mean, it was 24 years ago, 25 years ago. So it feels like yesterday in some ways and feels like
It
100
does.
years ago
Yeah.
in other ways.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was looking back and realized that, that was the first year they started offering certification, and that's when I said, I'm old.
I know, right?
And later, after working with Terry for quite a while, I really wanted to go through the Karen Pryor program as well because I knew I'm a really strong proponent of continuing education and learning because during CPDT training is when I learned I didn't know anything.
Exactly. And I think my Karen Pryor certification is my most proud of all the certifications I have.
Yeah.
If I took away all the other letters, if I had to only pick one, even over my biology degree, because it's just for dog training, it's the most powerful one that I did. So I think it's
Yep,
great.
I agree.
So tell us about what is KARE? What does KARE stand for? Tell us a little bit about KARE.
Kitsap Animal Rescue and Education. I wanted to name it Kitsap Animal Rescue through Education, so I use that a lot. So KARE, that's what it stands for. When I was volunteering at the shelter, our euthanasia rate was above 50%, and we were seeing a lot of great dogs that were having to be put down because of space and minor behavior problems, etc. So a good friend of mine that I met there who was mentoring with me because she, wanted to become a trainer. She and I started to rescue the dogs from the shelter. This was back in the late 90s. We would take them into our homes, work with them, train them, and then find them homes.
Mhm.
So it was very small, grassroots, just the two of us working at trying to one dog at a time type of effort. And over the course of doing that for a couple, 3 years, realized it's expensive. And
Mhm.
so we decided to start a nonprofit. And since then, we've grown considerably. For many years, we did a lot of rescues out of Missouri because I had a woman who moved there who was one of our board members for a while. And the situation there was a lot worse than where we are now in the Pacific Northwest, or were back then. So we were bringing dogs in from Missouri. Then COVID hit, of course, and we still do some rescue. We focus on dogs that need to be rehomed. We're a large military community, so sometimes we'll get people who are being transferred and can't take their animals for whatever reason. So we do rehoming rescue primarily now. We, over the years, have morphed more into an education-based rescue, and we have a training facility now that we built as of 2017. It's small. We have five certified trainers that work with us. And then we have currently 3 training interns that are studying either through KPA or CCPDT to get certified. And we offer classes anywhere from basic manners. We have puppy, adolescent, and adult manners. Our most in-demand class is reactive dog training. And our reactive dog training is a 3-level, 3-tiered program that is first class, being in a room with other dogs but not seeing them. And then the second class, which is they're each 6 weeks, is taking those skills out to a large field on our property where they have lots of distance to work on the reactivity. And then our third level is out and about, we call it, where with trainers, one-on-one training staff, we go out as a group to different locations where it's not as predictable as on our property. We also host chicken camps a couple times a year, usually. I had the privilege of getting to know Terry Ryan. We have become very good friends. I'm not name dropping. I think
Yeah,
you know that.
I know. Yes. And
But
I
it's
can attest that you are truly good friends and Terry adores you and you adore Terry. I witnessed it myself.
currently we're doing a virtual chicken camp with Terry. I'm kind of her partner in those shenanigans, as she calls them. And we also have grant programs for education for people who want training but just can't make it a priority in their budgets. And that includes continuing education for our interns. And we have a medical grant for a veterinary grant program for people who are experiencing catastrophic vet bills and just don't have the funding. Our latest project is our housing outreach pet education program. We call it HOPE. We are involved heavily in a co-shelter, which is a homeless shelter, emergency shelter, where people are allowed to move in with their pets. And we've been very involved in that. There's a core group of 6 of us that are working on that too, and putting it in place and being there to help with, everything. It's an unusual co-shelter in that we have a dedicated pet center on site where we have staff, we have supplies, vet comes in, etc. So that's kind of in a
Yeah.
nutshell who
And with
KARE is and
Hope
what we do.
organization, we will be doing another podcast. We're going to talk about that in major detail, but it's something that's very close to my heart. So I'm really looking forward to when we talk about that. But this time we want to focus a lot on KARE, but KARE is the founding part of Hope. I mean,
Yeah,
Hope wouldn't happen without KARE. So, it is all part of that umbrella that is
yeah.
underneath. Now, some people may not know, where are you? Because I didn't realize until I went up to Washington. I had no idea where I was going when I went to chicken camp, this little town that I didn't know that actually is very beautiful. So tell us, like, where is KARE located? And do you still house any dogs? Like, do you shelter any dogs?
KARE is located in Hillsborough, Washington, which is, if you think of the Puget Sound, Seattle is over here, and there's a sound that goes like this, and a body of water. And you can either take a ferry to get over to this peninsula, or you can drive all the way around from the airport or wherever. There's several little towns. Bremerton is the one that most people would know because it's got the naval base shipyard there. And we are in our training facilities located in a little town called Polsbo.
So I know you rehome dogs. Did you ever
Shelter.
have a shelter or
We do not have a shelter. We never have. We are a foster-based rescue. At one point, we had 8 or 10 fosters at any given time. We're down to 2 or 3. It's just for whatever reason, fostering is hard right now to find, but we never did have a shelter, kennels, or anything.
So you're doing the rehoming, but now really KARE is going more towards that education part and the training part. And what year did you start KARE?
Uta, the co-founder, and she and I met at the shelter at the Humane Society, and we became fast friends. She was like the sister from a different mother. And I think we first started taking the dogs out of the shelter and working with them in 99.
Mhm.
And we applied for our first nonprofit status in 2001.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So it's been around a long time that you guys have been growing, and then taking these dogs out and allowing them to get some training so they could be rehomed. And then training site started in 2017. Is that correct?
For a long time, we were doing just one-on-one training with
Mhm.
people, and then we rented a facility for 3 or 4 years. And then I got a small amount of state money when my parents' family home sold. And my husband, who KARE would not exist, I don't think, if it weren't for him, and
Mhm.
certainly not our training facility, encouraged me to use it for my dream, which was to have property and have a training facility. And with his support and the support of the board and all of my volunteers, we made it happen. It's not big, but it's on an acre plus, and so we have a nice private. One of my pet peeves is people going to dog parks with reactive dogs. So we have a private dog yard that you can rent so that, people can have the comfort of being able to take their dog off leash and knowing nobody else is going to be on the property.
Mhm.
It's about 1,100 square foot facility. And then, like I said, it's got a large field that allows us to do, outside reactive dog training.
And then you must have an indoor area for your classes as well, did you?
Yeah,
Because it
yeah,
is in Washington. So, and I can attest,
yeah, we
you,
don't,
you never
yeah.
know when the rain's coming.
Yeah, and sometimes our reactive dog program outside is you're soaking wet by the end. But yeah, it's about 1,100 square foot building that was on the property, and we just remodeled it to make it into our little training facility.
That is just so amazing. Diane and I spoke about this a little before we were on the podcast, but how much dog training has changed and how much we really want people to understand the importance of positive force-free training as KPA, trainers. And there's still so many trainers out there that do old school methods. And one thing that when we talk more about hope, that connection between domestic violence and how we treat our dogs. I
Yeah,
mean, training in the traditional way is still accepted by a lot of people. And
yeah,
sometimes it's extremely abusive, the way that some dogs are trained. And then
yeah,
it just allows the acceptance of domestic violence. So when we talk more about hope, because hope is just is a shelter for homeless and people who don't have a home or displaced or something. But a lot of times those are women and children who
yeah,
had to leave a domestic violence situation, and having a place where you can take your dog is
yeah,
great because
yeah,
that's a problem. Some people stay
yeah.
in those relationships because they don't want to leave their animal in that
Yeah,
situation.
and
So
we had that situation recently. And the nice thing about being able to do community outreach and education is doing programs for young children that are focused on positive methods because especially in compromised communities or at-risk communities where domestic violence of a lot of ways reinforcement-based training has never been heard of.
exactly.
And it makes a big difference because the statistics are there about a high percentage of people who are engaged in domestic violence abusers have a history of animal abuse. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, and
Exactly.
and traditional methods are oftentimes animal abuse.
Exactly, exactly. And partly I wanted to have you on for so many reasons. I mean, and I'm looking forward to when we talk more about hope because I'm not discrediting hope now. I just want to be able to focus on that so much more and take the whole
Yeah,
time for it.
yeah,
But it's also just the way that you're evolving and changing the culture from taking them from the Humane Society so they could get that one-on-one training so they didn't have to be euthanized just because of space. And then growing it where then you went from one-on-one to then okay, let's teach other people how to do this. So let's start doing those classes. Let's
yeah,
start building that. And then going from your classes to outreach even more, like doing chicken camp and doing these things, and then evolving to hope too. So I just think that your evolution of how you've been changing the world, and you may not fully feel like it, but it's that butterfly effect. You're changing the world and you're also which also I admire, is a woman in business and a woman who's following her dreams and being able to move. I got a little emotional for you there,
Yeah, me too. I guess that's true.
because you like I just listening to your story, which I have heard before, but I only heard it when we met in pieces, so we talked about care and then we got back to class, and we talked about hope, but we went back to class. And now to hear it all in a row, like for the last 20 years, for sure, you have been able to just take one step at a time. So, something that I take pride with, truly force free animal training, is not just treating dogs good, but it's also people, but also following your dreams and the baby steps it takes to get to your goals, whatever that goal is. So you also have where you're working with reactive dogs, and not everybody works with reactive dogs. I personally enjoy working with reactive dogs because most of the time they're fearful, stressed, or
Yeah.
anxious. So getting into that underlying piece so they can live a happier life, but you do a lot of the similar things I do of puppy classes too. So let's set them up for success. Let's,
Yeah.
socialize them. And so what you're doing is changing the dogs, but you're changing people, too, and the community now because you're also doing the outreach. So I'm just like honored to, get to know you and things. Have you seen some different things on how care has changed the community, or because you've been there for a while, you've been in the same small towns? And do you ever look back and see like, wow, care helped change this in the community, or this has made a difference in the animals' lives or people's lives in our small community?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a few things that, I look back on and say we had a hand in this.
Mm-hmm.
We've been very involved with school districts and trying to do as many free half-hour dog body language, communication classes as we can, getting the children to understand how to interact appropriately. We were involved with some classrooms for at-risk middle school children, getting them to work on reinforcement-based training with our therapy dogs. I've looked back on that and realized that's led to more humane treatment in many ways with that program, at least in some small way, not big classrooms, but one person at a time. And we've had a lot of people come in who first wanted to take classes and they didn't like the techniques that they saw in other trainers, so they came to us. And all of our interns basically have come to us that way.
Yeah.
And one of my proudest accomplishments is we had a young woman come to us about 4 or 5 years ago who was going to get a dog. She didn't have any skills as a trainer, had never trained a dog, had never had her own dog. And she came to us after she had went to a couple of other trainers and said, no, I'm not going to do this. And now, fast forward 5 years, she is a guide dog trainer down in Oregon.
Wow.
So it was like
Wow.
when she moved off to do that, I was in tears because it was like seeing my child grow up to reach her dreams, which I
Totally.
thought was great. So that's
Yeah.
one of the other defining moments that comes to mind is I do some volunteer work with our local sheriff's office, and over the last 20 plus years have gotten to know a lot of them. And then one of the canine deputies came to me about 3, 4 years ago and asked about the kind of training we do because he was with their state training group and the trainers had him do something. He said, I couldn't do it to my dog,
Mhm.
and I want to learn about other options. So for him to come to me and ask that, and he came, I offered him a free 1 day click and chickens
Oh, yeah, that's right.
class, which is just
Uh-huh.
like a very brief introduction to clicking chicken training, which is
Uh-huh.
the whole thing is you can't put a choke chain around a chicken and make it do something. You have to learn how to motivate it. And he just was enamored with the whole concept, and to me
Yeah.
that's important. And like I said earlier, having the horse training group that came that wanted to learn about other alternatives to training a horse using reinforcement base. So helping to spread the word.
I
And
mean, every animal can be trained with positive force-free methods. And there's some animals you can't train into us, like chicken. What are you going to do? Like if you start punishing a chicken, you swat, they're going to run away. Like they're not going to do what you
flying
want
off the
them.
table.
Right. Exactly. So,
Yeah,
and I think it's great because as we get young people and young kids, if we can catch them early, it not only helps them learn how, like, when they get to older and they start to get their own animal, they can't even understand why you would do these traditional
yeah,
methods, but it also helps them, be kinder. And I know for me, the more I've evolved as a positive force free trainer, the more empathy and compassion I have for humans. I've always had a lot of empathy. I've always been very empathic, almost sometimes to a fault where I get myself taken advantage of, but I've learned those
I
boundaries as I've gotten older. But so I've always been, it's never been a problem that I didn't, but now I have boundaries around it. But I really see, like, as a vet tech, when somebody loves their animal, but financially they just can't afford things, instead of being judgmental, it's like, understanding what a difficult position that is to be in when you love your animal. Or a lot of times when I work on my one-on-ones, especially, it's about fixing whatever the issue is and helping this animal. But I also, not one is cookie cutter, because I'm like, what are you capable of doing? If,
right.
if you are a single mom working three jobs, I'm not going to give you an hour's worth of homework every day, because
Yeah.
no one's going to be successful. So part of my conversations are, you know, what are you able to do? Okay, what's our end goal? How can we get there? And it's that empathy and compassion that helps. And as we teach our younger kids empathy and compassion for dogs and animals, it really, I think, will start to help change
Yeah.
humans in the world over time. It's just going to be, like you said, one person at a time. And it's not always easy, because positive training is not always sexy. I mean,
And it's
and
not always fast, but
it's not always fast. And we don't edit our successes, because it can be a 6 month project, not a 6 minute project kind of situation. So, but it's so important, and it's for humanity, for animals, and for people. So I just love what your vision has been, and that I love that you have keep stepping into your dreams, and when that dream gets filled, you're like, okay, what's the next thing?
yeah,
So, you
that's
know, so, and I think that's where you and I are so similar too. We're like, okay, accomplish this now. What's next? And
yeah.
it's a blessing and a curse, but it
Yeah, it
is.
is. Yeah, it
So,
is.
well, Dianne, is there anything else you would like the audience to know, whether it's about KARE or chicken camp or positive training? Because you have so many wonderful things, and we will have information about all this in our, in the bio and the comments section, so people will know more about KARE and chicken camp. But is there anything you'd like to share with the audience? Any last thoughts?
There's many, many things. I think one of the things that I really hope people learn as we go through life is you can make a difference, but it's kind of like baby steps. I can make a difference by doing one person at a time type of thing. You can make a difference. You just have to find what it is that you love, that you're passionate about, that you want to help others understand, and start there. When you decide that this is what I'm good at and this is what I want to do, you can do it, and it can make an impact, and you'll never even know it possibly. So just focus on the positive.
Exactly. And sometimes you're going to have little setbacks. And it's just like training animals. Like, we don't lump it. Lumping always causes problems. And so
Yep.
we have to think the same thing for us. Baby steps, to get to our goals, and
Yeah.
baby steps to get where we want to be. Well, Dianne, I am so happy we finally got to have our time together, and I'm looking forward to our time when we get to talk about hope and focus on hope, because that's a whole nother segment of this, but it just needs its own time.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And if anybody wants to check out KARE, you can check out KARE. And Dianne helps with Terry Ryan with Chicken Camp. And if you're curious about what chicken camp is, you can do some research on chicken camp, because if you're interested in learning more about positive training in a little different way, but very fun,
Yeah.
check out chicken camp. I mean, I have been training since the 90s. I just a couple months ago did chicken camp, and I still found it like amazing,
Yeah.
and learned more, fine-tuned my skills, and found it enjoyable thing. So whether you're like early trainer or experienced trainer, or we even had an attorney in our group, and we had people who didn't even do animal training, but it got them to learn more about what positive training looks like. And when you're working with a chicken, they don't have the facial features like a cat or a dog, where they can look cute or confused or whatever. Like, they just have their chicken faces. I mean,
Yeah.
you kind of get to know your chicken, so you assume they're happier, and you really have to be very clear in your communication, or they will do something different than you
Yeah.
expect. And it usually
And
is an error on the handler. If they're not understanding, it's because
yeah.
you didn't have your timing, you weren't clear, you were expecting too much, you weren't paying attention to the distractions in the room. I mean, you can learn a lot about.
Sound like child raising?
Yes, exactly.
It works in every avenue of life. Task
Exactly.
analysis, how do I make this easier? How do I make
Exactly.
it understandable?
For sure. So, well, thank you so much, Diane. I hope you all check out KARE and support this great group in Washington. And if you happen to be up there, check it out because I
Please
really
stop
enjoy it.
by.
Yeah, it's great. So, thank you, everybody. And thank you so much, Diane, for spending this time with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We'll see you next time, everybody.